Welcome back to Inside the Pylon, a Midwest college football podcast, joined tonight, as always, by Clinton Boring. I am Ryan Sadkowiak, and tonight we are pleased to be joined by a special guest, Matt Shelton, as we are talking Northwestern football as we continue our fall preview series. Matt, first and foremost, how are you doing this evening?
I'm doing great. Thanks to you guys for having me.
Clinton, how about you, sir? How are you doing tonight?
I'm doing great. I'm hoping the kids do pretty peaceful for the wife at bedtime tonight. So I hope you got that echo cancellation on just in case.
Oh, buddy, always, it's good as long as we stay connected tonight. So we're hoping for no technical glitches tonight after a little snafu last night. I'm trying the Wi-Fi extender to see if that's any better, if that can get through these walls down here into the basement. Once again, not going live tonight. Again, just as I try to get my own internet stuff figured out, we'll hopefully get up to that in the next couple of weeks as we go through this fall preview series here. You can find our YouTube channel at ITPCFB, which is where you can find us on Instagram and Twitter as well. Follow us and interact with us on the social medias. These two shows, though, for the time being, are only going to be in the podcast feed, Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your shows at. Inside the Pylon there. Follow the show, give us a like, give us a review, and obviously hit that subscribe button so you never miss an episode. So before we kind of get into the meat and potatoes of tonight, Matt, let's just have you kind of introduce yourself, how long you've been on the Northwestern beat for, and what your career up to this point has looked like for the listeners.
Yeah, happy to. So right now I'm the managing editor for Wildcat Report, which is Northwestern's Rivals affiliate. I've been working there on the beat for, I want to say 4 years now. Been managing editor for the past year and still working in partnership with the publisher Louis Vicaire, who founded the site and has been running it for about 20 years. So we've been working as partners for the past year or so, and it's been eventful to say the least, but also had the opportunity to cover two pretty great seasons for our football and basketball team last season. So very excited about that and very excited about where both programs are going forward.
Yeah, I forgot about the basketball team. That was a hell of a run for them this year.
Yeah, certainly.
So, as we dig into our fall preview...
Matt,
oh,
there he goes. I think you're just slightly delayed, Ryan. So,
I got you.
So Matt, what we were going to dive into first tonight is obviously David Braun enters last July after the end of the Fitzgerald era. He succeeded against most projections last year under those difficult circumstances in year one. So what will his team be capable of with a full offseason under him for 2024?
Yeah, I think the ceiling of the team should be to try to make another bowl game. You know, that there's a range of outcomes and a range of different ways you can get there, but I think this is a staff that has had a decent bit of turnover, but I also think that's turnover in the right direction, and brought in a new offensive coordinator, promoted a new defensive coordinator, and, you know, with a year of preparation to also kind of counteract a year of putting yourself on film for the first time as a head coach, I think Northwestern's ceiling and kind of target should be to get to that 5 to 7 win mark in what is a pretty tough schedule.
And then you just brought up there the addition of the new offensive coordinator. Is it Zach Lujan? Is that how you pronounce it?
It's Lujan.
Lujan. Okay, there we go.
Yeah.
So he's a 28-year-old offensive coordinator. He's had back-to-back FC national champion South Dakota State. So we want to get your quick thoughts on his scheme and what he's bringing to this Northwestern offense.
Yeah, I mean, when you talk about the definition of what a prodigal coach looks like, you know, he's 29-1 in his last 30 games. His only loss was as a play caller. That is, he's 29-1 in his last 30 games as a play caller. The only loss there is to Iowa, who's an entire division above him. He's bringing in a very diverse and modern offensive scheme. Loves to use shift trade motion. Loves to run the quarterback. Loves to give defenses a lot of different looks. It'll be very exciting to see what his Northwestern offense looks like. And I don't think we've had excitement about a Northwestern offense preseason since probably 2018, depending on your opinions of Clayton Thorson and the McCall era. But like I said, I think that there's a real excitement to see what this ends up looking like. I think if there's a red flag, it might be that he's suffered a bit from his own success, that he, like I said, he's in his late 20s and he's only known South Dakota State, which has established itself as the Alabama, Georgia apex predator type program of FCS football. Like I said, you know, they're back-to-back national. They've won more national titles than lost games in the last 2 seasons. And he's doing that with an offensive line that I want to say just sent 2 players to the league. You know, that's not the level of talent comparatively that he's going to have at Northwestern. But I do think he's a very young and hungry coach who is willing to adapt and impress the staff in the interview process. And part of impressing the staff in the interview process was showing how he plans to adapt his scheme to that different kind of roster and to that higher level of competition. So I'm sure there'll be a few kinks to work out once the rubber hits the road, but I think there's real excitement about where the offense could be under him long term.
Certainly.
I remember, you know, we were talking about the difficult circumstances in which David Braun kind of ascended, at least into the interim role last year. And I want to kind of rewind. We're almost at the 1 year anniversary here coming up within the next couple of days of that initial suspension to Pat Fitzgerald, obviously coming right on the heels of fall camp last year. If you can kind of go back in the memory banks here a little bit, Matt, what was kind of the morale, not like the program as a whole, but just the team itself, kind of heading into camp with kind of that cloud hanging over them, and how were they able to kind of rally around that and have the type of year that they ended up having last season?
Yeah, I don't want to speak too much in detail to the players' mindsets because I don't necessarily have that information for you. I wasn't talking to a lot of players at that time. You know, I don't want to project. I think if you look at the results on the field and with some people transferring out, and I'll even say in the media space, I think there's a lot of uncertainty around the program. I think a lot of people didn't know basically what was going to happen. They didn't know if the team was going to go out and win 1 game or 0 games, or what the season was going to look like. And I think that showed early. You know, if you look at the first 6 quarters, they basically got run off the field by a Rutgers team that had a good season, but probably wasn't running anyone else off the field that way the rest of the season. And they go into halftime tied with Utah. And they go on to win that game by 30-plus points. And then they get rocked by Duke. And then they go into a Minnesota game where they're down, again, about 20 points. I think it was 31-14, or I forget it was 31-7 before the team came back. But eventually, both the players on the field and the staff in the building rallied around each other. And I think they're continuing that momentum forward. So I think it's a very different team and coaching staff than it was at that point in time in terms of confidence. And I'll even say in terms of stability with the coaching staff. You know, they made a lot of significant changes this past season. There's now one coach, the defensive coordinator, Tim McGarrigle, who's been there more than 2 years in a row. This is David Braun's coaching staff. It's over the next year or two, it's going to become David Braun's team, and I think that's a positive direction for the program right now.
Now, as we look forward to 2024, turning the page on 2023, you know, a big change at the quarterback position with Brendan Sullivan transferring out to Iowa and Vanderbilt transfer Mike Wright coming in. As things are kind of, as you're handicapping this heading into fall camp here, do you expect Mike Wright to be the starter as we begin the 2024 season, or are you taking the field on that?
It absolutely should be Mike Wright. And I think it would have been Mike Wright if Brendan Sullivan did transfer out. I think that's one of the reasons that Brendan Sullivan made the decision he did, was talking to the staff after that. I was very fortunate enough to have a sit-down interview with David Braun after that, and he basically said we had an honest conversation. We planned to bring someone in from the portal. We couldn't guarantee a starting job. And again, I'll now change from that quote to my interpretation, and Brendan's decision was a reaction from that. And there was also concern. I don't know if concern is the right word, but it seemed based on the distribution of snaps that even if Brendan had stayed, that there was a chance that even on roster that Jack Lausch would have been the prohibitive starter there. But I think even from the end of last season, knowing that Ben Bryant was in his last year of eligibility, the plan was always to bring in, to examine the transfer market, be aggressive, try to bring someone in. And I think Mike Wright is exactly the kind of quarterback they wanted to find, and that was available to them within Northwestern's target range, I guess I should say, in terms of bringing in a plus one runner is the term that Braun and Lujan love to use, is having a quarterback that's a plus one runner, giving the defense something more to think about. Mike Wright has 3 games of 100-plus rushing yards in his career. He nearly has as many career rushing yards as Brendan Sullivan has career passing yards. This is the kind of guy that they want for next season. That's not to say that there aren't concerns. His completion percentage is nearly 10 points lower over his career than Ben Bryant's was. He's not going to be as surgical or have the arm strength that Bryant did, but he brings another dimension with his legs. And if everyone's healthy, I think he's absolutely the runaway favorite to be the starter next season.
Well, you mentioned the arm strength for him, and that's not something I had read a whole lot about, and his accuracy.
Well, I shouldn't say arm strength. I should say accuracy. Accuracy. Again, it's just the completion percentage differential there and the confidence in delivery. I'm sure he can make, in terms of distance, I'm sure he can make whatever throw you need him to.
Yeah. So as far as the accuracy, if we think back even just a few years ago when OSU was at Northwestern and how some of that Chicago weather can impact the play on the field, we now forward that to 2024. You guys have a different stadium that you're going to be playing in, is playing next to the lake. Is there, I guess you haven't seen him play yet, but I've heard in the spring game there was some wind and stuff pushing in there, affecting some of those guys, or the spring practice. Is there any concern that is going to limit Mike Wright at all, additionally, with his accuracy?
That's a good question. I mean, it's a concern in spring because they don't. I mean, they have a tree line between the practice field and the lake, but that's about it. But again, that's because it's their practice field. For the temporary stadium, there's actually going to be a little bit more of a buildup of bleachers as a wind blocker there, but it's not going to be total. I would imagine there'll probably be 3 or 4 of those games that are played, and it's fine. But there are probably going to be 1 or 2 or 3 of those games where you better bring your running game, because anytime you put the ball above 6 feet in the air, who knows where it's going to go? It's going to be, there's going to be a home field advantage, and that's where I'm not going to say that they made their decision based on we might be playing in 1 or 2 more windy games than before, but I don't think it's an accident that they want a quarterback that can change the game with his legs, and they went and got one. And it's going to be in a season where, like I said, there's going to be one heck of a home field advantage sometimes.
Yeah. Is there any chance a ball goes into the lake?
I think absolutely.
Okay.
I think
yes.
I think you might need an ambitious quarterback doing it on purpose. But I'll put it this way: you can, from the mock-ups, you can definitely put a ball over the east stands.
Oh boy.
Whether or not someone will try to punt the ball north-south and it just gets carried, I doubt it. But it wouldn't surprise me if a quarterback at one point is throwing the ball away and it's like, the lake's right there. You only get so many times where you have an opportunity like that presenting yourself. I'm going to see if I can put it in the pond.
Yep.
So you need one of those.
I don't know how old you are, Matt, but if you remember the name Joe Bowserman from Ohio State, I remember a throw from him. He put one up about 20 to 30 yards in the stands. So if there's a Joe Bowserman out there trying to throw a ball away this year, we might get that in the water there.
Yeah, that could happen. Absolutely.
Nice, Ernie.
And then, so kind of carrying into the offense, I was reading up on the running game. Cam Porter was your leading running back last year for 2023. What kind of we expect for the load and carries for him? And then how much do the other backs start to cut into his workload? As you know, I've read about Joseph Hyman II, and then we have Caleb. Is it Komalafe?
Yeah,
something
Komalafe.
close to there. Where someone put in an article that he may be the most talented back in the running room. So how do we see that running back room playing out in 2024?
Yeah, I'm not exactly sure where Komalafe's ratio is going to be. I think between Cam Porter and Joseph Hyman II, I'm going to ballpark that right now before fall camp at probably 60% Porter, 40% Hyman. Again, in terms of it still being a Big Ten defense that you're up against, it's hard to run 5'9", 185, which is Hyman's build right now. It's hard to run that often between the tackles. And Porter's still not a slowpoke by any means. He can make something happen in space, but he's also 220. And so in terms of the grinded out style that Lujan liked to play at South Dakota State, in terms of putting your imprint on the game, Porter's that kind of back, and he's still going to be the lead back in that room. He's going to get the carries to justify that. But also, I think if you watched a lot of Northwestern last year, anytime Joseph Hyman got the ball, you noticed. He makes you look up from your popcorn. Like he's lightning in a bottle. You watch some of the screenplays, some of the runs he breaks into space. I think I've said a few times, Northwestern has 3 players with elite speed this season. Basically, you're fast on any team you play for. You've got Mike Wright at quarterback. You've got AJ Henning at wide receiver. And Joseph Hyman absolutely deserves third billing in the running back room there. He's a great athlete, and they're going to want to put him into space as much as possible, while also making sure that he's not getting hamstrung by injury or taking too many unnecessary hits between the tackles. That'll continue to be Porter's role.
And then kind of a thing that directly impacts the run game is talking about the offensive line play for Northwestern. And then I was doing some reading that the tight ends, I don't know if they were the worst, but one of the worst blocking groups in the NCAA last year, per the article I read. But how do we see the offensive line playing out for 2024? Improvement? Are we going to be about the same?
I think it'll be an improvement. I think they have a lot. They were one of the worst teams. I want to say they were the second worst Power 5 team back when the Power 5 was a thing. In terms of sacks allowed, it was a group that really struggled, especially against some of the more elite opponents. Like when they played Penn State, that was a really, really tough game to watch, just in terms of how much pressure they were able to put on the quarterback. And I mean, they knocked Ben Bryant out of the game. They knocked him out for the next 3-4 weeks. And just in terms of how often they're able to hit him, it wasn't like an open field or live ball injury. It was just, they basically just hit him over and over until he was knocked out. But I do think there is a chance for improvement. They, both in terms of rising players on the roster and in terms of transfers in, you could probably lock in one player into the starting lineup. I think Caleb Tiernan's going to be your left tackle. Everywhere else is up for grabs. I think you can also kind of give a half lock to Josh Thompson. He'll probably be the right guard or right tackle. But those other 3 spots, there's kind of 5 or 6 players that are up for that. You have a rising young player in Jordan Knox, redshirt freshman, nearly got a starting spot at guard last year. You've got Jack Bailey coming in from Colorado, which is where Bill Boyle, the new Northwestern offensive line coach, that's where he coached last year. So he's coming in. He's probably a prohibitive starter at center or guard. And then you've got 2 talented tackles transferring in. You have Matt Keeler from Texas Tech, and you have Cooper Lovelace from USC, both of whom are also not planning to transfer in to sit on the bench. So it's not great when you're going in knowing probably only one of your starters for sure. Again, 1.5, because I'm pretty sure Thompson will start. It's just going to be about where. But they definitely have a lot to figure out in fall camp. But the good news is, if they can find the right combination, lots of room to improve from last year.
Sounds good.
Matt, as you've kind of like gone through either from viewings in the spring or just any deep dive that you've done on South Dakota State's offense over the last couple of months, have you been able to glean anything from not necessarily the type of playbook that they're going to run, but any changes that they might make to that run blocking scheme to try to help that offensive line come along, especially early in the season as they're trying to work on gelling together?
Yeah, I'm not exactly sure. Again, that there's a lot up in the air about what the O line will look like. That'll be a conversation between Coach Lujan and Coach O'Boyle. But I think it's really also really hard to transfer a philosophy over from South Dakota State, where again you're the biggest and the baddest in the land. You've got two guys going pro in the FCS. You're running through people, to paraphrase Marshawn Lynch. You're running through people's faces. You know, they're going right at you. There are games Northwestern can do that this year, but there are other games. You know, when you're playing at Michigan, when you're playing Ohio State, you can't run through those guys. That's not going to go well. So I do think to hear from Northwestern fans was that when David Braun was talking about bringing in Zach Lujan, talking about that hire, that a key part of that interview process was how he'd adapt the South Dakota State system to the Big Ten. Now, he didn't give specifics because they're not going to give out state secrets at this stage of the game, but
sure,
Lujan's answer was satisfying enough to be hired. So I think there's optimism that there's going to be change in a positive direction. I don't have a specific scheme for you right now.
Part of my excitement, at least for the Northwestern offense this year, is I'm of the belief that it's a pretty underrated wide receiver room with particularly the top line guys that they have in that room. Do you anticipate to be it once again kind of a heavy rotation of those three guys, or do you see any up and comers who might make a dent in that and allow them to go 5 or 6 deep out of the receiver room this year?
Yeah, I think they'll be leaning on their top two really hard. Cam Johnson was out of eligibility. He's trying to make it in the NFL. I think they're very hopeful for that potential, but it's going to be a lot of Bryce Kurtz and AJ Henning. I think not that they'll be averse to a 3 wide receiver set, but in terms of end of season stats, if those guys are healthy, that's going to be pretty clearly your top two. Those are the guys that have the game reps, who have the physical skills, who've proven it before. You have a few intriguing options coming up. Frank Covey, the fourth, was a guy who the team wanted to get on the field as a freshman last year, but he suffered an early season injury, and that wasn't possible. He's back healthy now as a redshirt freshman. He'll be getting a lot of opportunities in fall camp to make a push for that third spot. They've also got Reggie Florima, who's a 4-star out of high school that hasn't cracked the rotation yet. He has an opportunity to do so this year. He's not going to have a better opportunity to get in the rotation than right now. That third spot is wide open. It'll be Covey, him, a couple other options down the line like Calvin Johnson II, Donnie Gray, but it's really going to probably be those top two guys as Mike Wright's go-to. And I would especially look for AJ Henning. As I said, he's an elite speed guy. He was returning punts and kicks at Michigan before he came to Northwestern and have a bigger role on the offensive side of things. The players that are faster than AJ are few and far between. And he's one of the guys that when you're coming in as a new offensive coordinator, you like to have him in the toolbox. You like to have him as an option to go to as you're building out your playbook and the options you have. So I'm very excited to see how Zach Lujan utilizes him, especially this season. And last season was also Bryce Kurtz's first year fully healthy, and he really showed that he can be a top 1, top 2 option on a Big Ten team. And I think he'll only be better this year in his 6th season.
So I heard you correctly say Calvin Johnson II. Am I that old now that is his son?
Relation.
Or okay.
No relation.
I was like, man, I know I'm getting old, but this cannot be. Cannot
not
be
that
yet.
old yet.
And maybe I missed this part with Northwestern last year. Is Henning expected to still be or will be utilized in the punt return or kick return game at all for them, or they lean on someone else there for the time since he's going to be more of the feature guy at wide receiver?
Not exactly sure. Once we have a few more availabilities in the fall, that'll be something that the beat will ask around for the coaches to kind of get a little more of an impression. They've put him back there a bit in the spring, I think, but similar to last year, they normally used him for punts and then would use Azuma and Hyman, or occasionally Anthony Tyus for kick returns, which is typical. As he takes on a larger role in the offense, you don't want him gassed on first down because he tried to break a return. Or again, if he does break a good return, you still want him on first down. And they still have elite speed at other positions, so I'd be surprised if he's on kick return. I think depending on how the season goes and how big his workload is, he'll still probably be on punts just because he can be such a game changer there. But that'll be something we find out in fall.
And I feel like too, as we go further along in time, like it's always the battle of, if he's your superstar, your speedy guy, you want the ball in his hands any way you can get it. But when you look at like a punt return, or if you have a guy that's on kick return or both, it's just extra hits that they're taking. And then, albeit it's not the massive per se, creating a more massive injury risk, there is still something there that they take the wrong hit and then you lose your superstar guy. And I remember way back in the time machine, Ted Ginn in the national championship opened up the kick return touchdown, breaks his ankle in the celebration, and then on was history from there. So just thinking about kind of that scenario there from my perspective with that.
Yeah, I mean, that's an awful worst case scenario for Ginn there. But I think another maybe a more boring answer is that it can also just be a lot of fair catches.
Yeah.
I think especially now, Big Ten punters get a lot of practice. It's a rare opportunity to return. But I think there's a chance you still see him out there.
Absolutely.
As we get towards the end here, Matt,
where we have
I think
Ryan's heading right into it. Ryan, go ahead.
Yes,
we're leading kind of towards the defense part, I think, is where we were heading there.
Yeah.
Heading right into the defense. You mentioned we got a new defensive coordinator.
Clinton, go ahead.
How much is Braun going to hand off all that load to him, or is he going to kind of let the new DC lead the way there?
I think in a very rare event in college football, I think David Braun was excited to give up the play sheet after last season. He took a lot on his shoulders on and off the field for the program. And while I think he knew that in that moment he needed to take that responsibility just because that'd be too much at once, I think he's very much looking forward to this season as a head coach in truth. And I also think Tim McGarrigle, who's a long time, at least by current Northwestern standards, well, he also played at Northwestern, all-time leader in program tackles. I think he was a kind of Braun's right arm with the defense last season. The linebackers came a long way, even in one season under him, with two all-conference players in Bryce Gallagher and Xander Mueller. And I think that'll continue to be a partnership, and that'll continue to be a dialogue, as it is for every coach that came up as a coordinator one way or another. That's always going to be a conversation with their side of the ball. But McGarrigle has the play sheet. It's going to be a similar system. It's not necessarily a third playbook in 3 years for the guys. I think it's probably going to be about 85-90% the same. But I mean, everyone's going to have their own spin on things. But I really do think that the McGarrigle defense is going to be pretty similar and have a heavy influence from the system that he and Braun kind of created last season together.
Certainly.
Is there a position group on this defense, Matt, that you're looking at coming back in this year that you would classify as a strength of the unit, and where do you see the biggest step forward coming for this defense in 2024?
I think the position of strength would either be safety or defensive end. I think in different ways. I think safety, you have two absolute studs right now who are guys you can just, I don't know if leave back there is the right word, but you have two guys that you can kind of, set it and forget it with Devin Turner and Coco Azuma, who both absolutely balled out last season. Azuma's going to be a returning captain. Turner could be in the running to be a captain as well. They're both incredibly talented, fast, athletic, hard-hitting great in coverage, safeties who could really be a great last line of defense for the unit. And then up front on the defensive end, at defensive end, it's an incredible amount of depth by Northwestern standards. They probably have 5 different players they feel comfortable starting, and are probably going to have as many as 7 contributing in one game. They have both really experienced, successful players like Aiden Hubbard, who led the team in sacks, Jalen Pate, who is pretty much right behind him. They have 2 extra year players in Richie Haggerty and Sean McLaughlin. They have 2 rising players who came into the program as 4 stars. You're going to have Anto Saka as a junior. You're going to have Michael Kilbane as a sophomore. It's a position that they have a lot of talent, and I think the program hopes that it's a positive and it doesn't create a logjam type situation. But I think that's a place where they can really throw a lot of different skill sets and a lot of different players out there, because I think especially in the modern era of defense, where offenses are pushing the pace or pushing with physicality, the ability to have replacement level players that can be fresh and still rush the passer or set the line is so crucial, and they're really going to be able to do that at defensive end this year.
I was impressed that Northwestern was able to hold on to these players, and not from the standpoint that they'd want to leave, but in the world that we're heading into with transfer portal and the money we can offer the player to leave a team. And reading all that they brought back, especially for that defensive line, I was impressed with the team, and I was impressed with these individuals and staying committed to the team that they originally went to.
Absolutely. And the team's done a very good job in terms of retaining players, or I should say retaining effectively undergrad players, players who do not have their degree. They've done an excellent job of retaining on roster. I think there probably are 2 players that left that they probably wish would have stayed. I'll say 3. I'll include Josh Preeb, but he went to Michigan, which I think is a pretty understandable change. You had Rod Hurd go to Notre Dame, and I'll admit, I think a lot of people, or I don't want to say a lot of people, I'll just say at least myself, I assumed that Rod was going to try to play pro. I thought that he would declare and try to be drafted in one of the later rounds or catch on as a UDFA. And he graduated with his degree before that. And then the other starter that they lost was Garnett Hollis, who transferred to West Virginia. But outside of that, most of the decisions in terms of transfers have basically boiled down to playing time or a lack of a guarantee thereof.
Nice. Ryan, any thoughts from you there?
That's actually, I want to kind of at least wrap up this portion of that discussion on what's kind of been, especially here at these higher academic programs, and I'm talking like Northwestern, Stanford, Vanderbilt, like the truly elite of the elite, like the difficulty in taking undergrad transfers, but also the type of kid that they're recruiting is that kid who's looking at both ends of the spectrum, not just, football after college, but what this degree is going to do for me when my life after football is done. So how's Northwestern kind of been able to on one hand, knowing that they're not necessarily going to be shopping from the same pool of players in the transfer portal as, some of their Big Ten brethren might be, but how are they able to kind of succeed in their high school recruiting, targeting these kids who are going to value and truly try to utilize what that Northwestern education can do for them?
Yeah, I think it boils down to development and retention. And I think you see that, not the crossover too heavily, but I think you also see that with the basketball program in terms of they've made some really solid pickups in NIL and in the transfer portal, but the bulk of their success comes from being able to develop stars and high quality players and carry it over year to year. And I think that's what Northwestern is also, for football, I think, hoping to do this season, of where, they did lose a few guys to, your really high-level programs. Lost Rod Hurd to Notre Dame, lost Josh Preeb to Michigan. That's going to happen. But Xander Mueller's coming back. Devin Turner's coming back. Coco Osmond's coming back. I mean, I can go down the list. They've done a very good job of the players that they recruited out of high school and have developed, of keeping those guys in-house and maintaining the underlying depth when there's a chance to play. And again, on the same level, they've lost a few guys who were very deep on a depth chart or we're not going to see much of the field. But they've really done a great job, less of, hitting home runs and not, they're not bringing in like Caleb Williams out of the transfer portal by any means. But one of the key things they've done and really utilizing their NIL budget for is making sure that the players that succeed at Northwestern stay at Northwestern. And that's what Braun has said, is that his vision for a successful modern Northwestern team is a team that is going to, out-team you, that is going to succeed because of cohesion, because of experience playing together. And that's something that when you look at the defensive line for next season, like I said, that's a lot of guys with a lot of snaps together.
Mm-hmm.
And when it comes to the system that they run, which is a little more on the defensive side, it's a lot more of base sets and simpler plays and counting on guys to know the scheme cold, trust each other in space, and make plays based on, again, knowing where everyone else is and making sure that they're holding up their end of the bargain in the scheme. That's part of it, is making sure that they have those reps together and you're building a cohesive whole, not just going out to get best player available. And that's not an ivory tower high horse thing, right? Like when you're Ohio State or Alabama and you try to play best player available, you get the best player available.
Mm-hmm.
And you win a lot of games that way. But that philosophy just wouldn't work at Northwestern. So they're playing the cards that they've been dealt, I think, about as good as you can play them.
Certainly. Ryan, do you have any other thoughts on this, or do we have time for our fun bonus question before we wrap up?
Let's hit that bonus question.
All right, Matt. So with these fall previews, we wanted to have a for fun bonus question for each one of you guys. Ryan and I are both foodies. We absolutely love pizza. So our bonus question for you is, what is the best pizza in or around Northwestern's campus?
Ooh, in and around Northwestern's campus? I don't know. It depends. Like if you're doing like best ability is availability. I mean, there's like Domino's or Sarpino's at any hour you need it.
Yeah.
I would say in terms of cultural impact as well, if I can factor that in, then I'll say Bob's Pizza.
Mm-hmm.
Bob's
Pizza. That is also the bar where you can play trivia, and it's also open till midnight, and that's a big plus.
Okay.
I don't know if I'm necessarily. I'll just say again, it's a great place. It's open till midnight, and it has pizza, and again, culture in terms of cultural impact, I'll give Bob's the nod.
Okay, yeah. I've been to Chicago once. I did we did a pizza tour there. Lou Malnati's. Oh gosh, I can't remember all the ones that we had. Pequod's was one of the big ones we had.
There's a Lou's on campus, and if I'm allowed to go to Chicago, then I say Pequod's, but that's like
absolutely
a decent ways. That's like an hour south of campus.
Yeah, Pequod's is. You better come hungry when you come to that place, man. Those things are huge. But yeah, that I think I'm gonna end up making a little Google Doc of these, and Ryan and I think our hope in the future is to just go to some of these games, take the show on the road, go to some of these games, and do a little live pizza review inside the pylon style. So we appreciate your guys' insight.
If I can give an at-large food suggestion, I would say check out Tomate on Noise, which is going to be about even west of where the temporary venue is going to be.
Okay.
If they're open, great food.
Okay, absolutely.
Burritos, great stuff.
Oh yeah, nice. We'll make a note of that for sure.
Oh, I like me some burritos.
Ryan, anything else from you, brother?
No, can you guys hear me? I keep cutting in and out.
No, you're good. You're good.
I think
the
my
biggest
computer.
thing is you're just
I don't know if
slightly
it's
delayed at time.
Okay,
but,
cool, man.
Yeah.
Yeah, just a little behind, but I was able to.
Yeah, it's that's good. The iPad's up and running. I think it's my computer, so that's we're nailing this thing down here. Before we get you out of here today, Matt, let the listeners know where they can find you, where they can find your work, and what you are kind of working on here over the next couple of weeks heading into fall camp.
Sure. You can find Wildcat Report at northwestern.rivals.com. You can follow me on Twitter at m_Shelton33. Right now, we're kind of in finishing up Northwestern's recruiting class. Oftentimes they don't necessarily run very much into the fall. So just kind of they're putting the finishing touches on that, and we're finishing our coverage there. Looking at media days in a few weeks. Also going to continue to research and publish content on both Northwestern construction sites, both the new Ryan Field building on Central and Ashland, and also the temporary site on campus. And I think that's probably our next slate for the few weeks, and then we'll hit media days and start the cycle all over again.
Well, I know that we're lucky we caught you in a lull here, and I know that things are going to start to pick up for you. So we really appreciate you taking some time for us tonight and indulging us in this little process here. I know I learned a lot, Clinton. I'm sure you learned a lot too. So we really appreciate you taking some time for us tonight, Matt.
Absolutely.
Of course, always happy to talk Northwestern.
All right, everyone.
Yeah. Thanks again, Matt. We really appreciate you joining us and taking the time.
Sounds good. Thanks for having me, guys.
All right. Yeah, guys, everyone, thanks for tuning in tonight. This is our last episode for the week. We will be back with you guys on Sunday night next week as we are talking to Hoosiers Huddle, talking some Indiana football. Thanks again, everyone. Have a great weekend, a safe, long weekend. Please, don't pick up the fireworks when they're lit. I promise you it's not worth it. No ER trips, everyone. All right, y'all. Take care, everyone.